So this Torah was prepared from the car ride last night with Atara, who gave me much of the information. And today also, when I came here and Ellie gave me a few minutes of quiet with it, he was sitting learning Sefer Bereshit, which is not the material for the Chidan Tanakh, and he gave me inspiration to look back in the Parshiyot. So one of the psukim, the verses that repeat itself over and over again within the long look at Sefer Dvarim. It's not something that comes up in a specific parsha, but it comes up over and over again over several parshiyot. Is doing Hayashar V'Atov or Hayashar. This idea of Yashar comes up over and over again in Sefer Dvarim. Now, when there is actually a mitzvah V'asita Hayashar V'Atov B'nei Hashem. You should do what is right and good in the eyes of God, and it's one of these commandments which is very amorphous, because it doesn't actually say what doing Hayashar V'Atov is, and Chachamim in different places try to translate it into practical halachot. For example, buying rights initially to a neighbor. So if he has a field, if you're selling your field and your neighbor has a field and he's interested in buying it for the same price as another buyer, so give him the right to buy first, because it's more convenient for him to have his farmlands next to each other as opposed to having to travel all around to take care of his farmlands. In other words, there what we see is an act of doing a good action. That's what we seem to think when we talk about V'asita Hayashar V'Atov, is doing good deeds. That's what we would think about when we talk about V'asita Hayashar V'Atov. In fact, when we look through Sefer Dvarim and we see the context of these phrases of V'asita Hayashar V'Atov in general, we seem to actually find them more in the context of prohibitions. That whether it's staying away from avodah zarah, staying away from eating blood, or making sacrifices in the wrong places, it seems to be about creating a lifestyle which knows the limitations, knows where you're not supposed to go to. That's V'asita Yashar V'Atov. And if I can expand on that just a tad, it means establishing some sort of moral compass in which you know where you're not supposed to go to. In other words, before we can get to the level that Chachamim spoke about of doing good deeds, we have to, what the Torah is telling us, is that the first step is to stay away from the bad things. Know the limitations, know what is wrong, and stay away from them. Be regimented. That's the first step, or in the way of the Tehillim, Sur Meira V'aseh Tov. Stay away from bad, V'aseh Tov. In a similar vein, we can look at other areas of halakha that we're familiar with. Perhaps one of the more popular Jewishly mitzvot in the popular sense of what people try to bring people into Judaism with, and Shmuley Boteach has turn Friday night into Erev Shabbat or something like that. I don't know what he calls it exactly. Shabbat, and people like Shabbat, and everybody sits around at the table together, and it's family time, etc., etc. But if we really look at Shabbat, the main part of Shabbat are the prohibitions, what we're not allowed to do. And how do I determine what's the main and what's not the main? Why don't I say that the positive commandments are just as significant as the prohibitions? Because the prohibitions, God, has much more severe punishments for the prohibitions as opposed to not. If you don't make Kiddush, the prohibition is not the same as violating one of the prohibitions of Shabbat. So the prohibitions seem to set the stage for the content. We often have this attitude that prohibitions creates a vacuum. There's no content there. How can you lead this life where you have all these prohibitions? What is your life all about? But the prohibitions actually set the stage for something much grander. Without the prohibition, without the limitations, we don't have anything. Similarly, maybe I'll skip the Tumah B'Tahara one. Where is this all leading? What I'm trying to say from all of this is that often our ability to do V'asita ha'yashar v'atov b'nei Hashem Elokecha, God's demand of us to do the right and the good thing, which, why does God have to command that of us? God is telling us to do the mitzvot all the time. There's 613 mitzvot, which this is one of them. But what is he getting at? If he's already told us what to do, what is V'asita yashar v'atov? And as I said before, God is interested in us establishing some sort of moral compass, internal moral compass, because as our discussion outside led us to the conclusion, not necessarily is everything exactly addressed in a precise manner in halakha, and we have to have a moral compass by which to go by. And what we learn from the Torah about V'asita yashar v'atov is that often, or not often, but the most basic part of doing V'asita hayashar v'hatov, and the yashar is the right thing, and it's also straight. As we could talk about a straight arrow. Someone who does everything like a straight arrow. They're not zigzagging around, but they're doing everything straight, is staying away from the bad things. And that's something that I think characterizes Mom, is that her unique ability to be regimented, know what's right, first of all, know what's wrong, and staying away from what's wrong, whether it's in health issues, whether it's in how she leads her life, morally, Jewishly. Mom knows what's wrong, and that's the first step. And I actually wrote about that in the Eitan asked us to write something, and I wrote about the story about when Granny passed away, that Mom got up in the morning. We weren't there. We were eating dinner at Miriam's house, we being Michael, Judy, and myself. And Mom and Robert. Well, we were at Miriam and Robert's. Well, you have a house, meaning that you were living with Robert, because before that, you didn't have a house.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
But didn't she say something about not interrupting?
Very.
That was in your favor.
In any case, Mom walked 2 hours to North York General to be with Granny after she passed away. And many good people in other situations will, without that moral compass, people who, are Shabbat observant Jews, they've made phone calls after a person's died when there's no emergencies, they've gotten into cars and driven when there's no emergencies. And because they're grief-stricken at that time, sometimes they lose their judgment. But Mom is a straight arrow. Mom is V'asita yashar v'atov. And even in that moment where she was grief-stricken, there was no unclarity as to what she had to do in either direction. She had to be with Granny, and she had to not get into a car and go there on Shabbat, because there was no justification for that. So she packed up a bag of crackers, and she walked 2 hours, and she was there. And that's something that we all have to learn from Mom, is that ability to be that straight arrow, to know what's right, to know what's wrong, and to go with that, because Mom's unwavering. She really is a straight arrow. You really can't elbow her off her path. If you elbow her off her path, it will just bounce back.